Well, good afternoon. And I was sitting there thinking all day long after listening to all the distinguished guests we had before what an old farm boy could come and talk to you about. So I think we need to just pull the pickup truck in here, let the tailgate down, start handing the beer out, we'll solve the problems. But I thank you for the opportunity to come here, and I'm very, very honored to be part of this discussion. So to give you a little better view of where I come from, because obviously if my voice wasn't breaking and I didn't had a cold last week, I'm still suffering from not being able to talk this week, you'd tell I wasn't from here. So I come from Georgia, and to give you a little bit better perspective of that, I come from Greensboro, Georgia, which is 8 miles from Madison, Georgia. Madison, Georgia is known as a very beautiful colonial town. Chamber of Commerce sells it as one of the few preserved colonial towns in the South. And the reason it was because when Sherman marched to the sea, he stopped in Madison, and it was the only town he didn't burn on his way to the sea. Now, there's several stories about why he didn't burn it. The Chamber of Commerce said it was too beautiful to burn. Well, the farmers, after the Farm Bureau meeting that tailgated their pickup, just decided the guy had a girlfriend there, and he decided to leave her home intact. But my wife says she knew the real story, and this is in a book. I'm not making it up. I went and read the book because I didn't believe her. But she had 3 cousins. They were McQuarters. One of them was a farmer, one was a merchant, one was a lawyer. Well, the farmer is buried about a mile away the crow flies from my house. So we're 8 miles from Madison. Sherman was camped out in Madison, Georgia, and he was burning all the crops, and nobody knew what they were going to do. So this cousin of my wife went to Sherman and said, if you won't burn our crops, we'll feed your army. Now, you're going to feed the enemy? That sounds kind of crazy, but he was a farmer. Farmers try to find out how they survive difficulty. So he's trying to figure it out. So Sherman agrees. They go back home. They cook 12 hogs. They take them back, feed Sherman's army. He doesn't burn the crops. Mr. McQuarrie took all these crops, harvested them, and divided them up among all his neighbors, got everybody through the winter so they could plant a crop again next year. That's what farmers do. My wife said the moral of that story, said if it hadn't been for her ancestors, mine would have starved to death a long time ago. That just gives you some perspective of where I come from. I thought, since I really can't contribute anything to what's already been said, a lot of it I can relate to, but from a 30,000 foot level as a farmer, this is not an easy subject to talk about. It's not simple. Now, on our part, a farmer says, all I want is a level playing field. I can compete with the world if you give me a level playing field. If you tear down all those barriers, I will compete with the EU, and I will compete with China and Brazil. And I see a lot of them sitting in here, and they're shaking their head, and they will. And we don't really want checks from the government. We want markets. We want open markets. That's what we want. And we want a farm. We don't want to sit in the rooms and have the debates and negotiate. We want to leave it up to brilliant people like Darcy Vedder, who done outstanding. I wish she was still here. I think she left. But she did an outstanding job. We supported TPP. And really sorry that this president pulled us out of that. And yes, I think that TPP was the opportunity for America to take the lead and really kind of shut China out. And we lost that opportunity. But it's gone. And we can't live in yesterday. So I really can't contribute to that. So I thought I'd talk from a farmer's perspective. Where are we at? And I describe it as we're in a perfect storm facing agriculture. And everybody, first thing they would say, well, yeah, trade wars have got us in a perfect storm. Well, I look at it as just one little piece of that pie. The farm economy was bad when Mr. Trump got elected. We'd already lost 50% of our income. So we went into a trade war limping as an industry. And that has really, really hurt us. Here comes Darcy. I was just bragging on you, Darcy. And you weren't here to let me brag on you. So we went into this trade war limping because of that. I hear Sonny Perdue talk a lot about infrastructure and what sets us apart from the world, and I agree with him. When it comes to agriculture and other commodities or other things that we make in America, what sets us apart from the rest of the world is our infrastructure. We can deliver it on time, it's quality, and we're dependable. They may pay a little bit more for it at times, but that sets us apart from the world, and we as farmers look around at our infrastructure and it's beginning to crumble, and we're concerned about what's happening there. Our roads, our bridges, our locks, our dams, they're getting old and worn out. And for God's sake, broadband is not a luxury, it's a necessity. And rural America needs it, wants it, and deserves it. And we got to deliver that to them for more than just agriculture so that we can use the technologies coming down the road. We got to have it for our children and their education. We got to have it for our health care. We got to have it for giving our young people a reason to come back to our communities and live, because once they go to college, these wonderful colleges where they have broadband, they're not going to go back to our rural communities where they don't have it. So it's absolutely a necessity. Part of that thing we see is that perfect storm in front of us is research and development dollars. China's outspending us 3-1 in research and development dollars. That is not a good thing. Our colleges, our land-grant colleges and companies across this country need to be spending those research and development dollars, because that's what keeps us on the cutting edge. And Lord help us if we get behind in that area. Consolidation is part of that perfect storm. If we look around at all the seed companies and fertilizer companies, all of them are consolidating, which means we got less people to buy from, less competitive markets, which drives us to consolidate, become bigger farmers. I didn't milk 300 cows all my life because I wanted to milk 300 cows. I would have loved just to milk 100 cows, but I couldn't make a living at it. I kidded my wife that I lived through the 80s now, and it was very difficult, and I was a small dairyman. And about the middle of the 80s, I either had to decide to do something else or put my wife to work or try to find something to diversify in. So we went into poultry too, and poultry helped us get through that very difficult time. But today, our farmers are hungry for something to diversify in. And I see poultry moving into this area of the country with Costco. I see if you have a hemp meeting, they will fill that room full and run out the back, trying to see if that might be the next opportunity for them to grow. So we don't want to be bigger just because we want to be bigger. We want to be bigger. We have to be bigger because the economy is a scale. And really and truly, the American public don't want that. They love a farmer. They'll tell you they trust farmers, but they don't trust agriculture. How do you separate us? Because they see agriculture as corporate farming. They see it as big farming. They want us to stay small. So that is part of that perfect storm in front of us. Climate change, and talking about climate change. The scary thing about climate change when you're a farmer is everybody wants to talk about it and want to talk about the new Green Deal, all the things that farmers are destroying the world and their climate. What we want to talk about is what we've done since our grandfathers farmed. The baseline should be back when my grandfather used to plow with a mule. That ought to have been the baseline, not where we're starting at today. We need to talk about how much money, time, and investment our farmers have already put in to saving the natural resources of this country and this world. And the carbon need we already take in. So we look at that discussion as a big threat to us, but we're going to take the lead. We're going to be part of that solution. We're going to make sure that we're at the table. And we're going to make sure that we help our country live up to their part of that. So a lot of things facing agriculture, and trade is one of those. But I'd like to talk about some of the good things, because sometimes I just get depressed listening to difficult things. And a lot of times we forget about the good. You watch the news, the only thing you hear is the bad. You don't ever hear the good. Well, we were heavily involved in tax reform. There was a lot of good things that happened in tax reform for agriculture. We don't talk about it anymore. It happened 3 years ago. Regulatory reform. We just 2 weeks ago, I stood in the building in Washington, D.C. when EPA Administrator Wheeler signed the final documents on the 2015 Waters of the U.S. rule, which was the largest land grab of the federal government in the history of our country. And we finally have gotten rid of it. And we have an opportunity to sit at the table and work with this administration to try to draw the new rule. And they're asking for you to make comments on it real soon. So we're part of the process to create a Waters of the U.S. rule that we all can live with. One that's easy to read and easy to interpret. Not that we got to go hire consultants and lawyers to be able to interpret it for us. Other regulatory reforms around endangered species. There's more decent endangered species laws being presented in Congress now than ever before. Things that use common sense and sound science that drives them. So we have opportunity to talk about those and lead that discussion. RFS and the ruling to use E15 year-round. Huge boost to the ethanol industry in this part of the country, and we worked hard on that. Last week they announced their solution to the small finery waivers and a way to fix that. And from what I understand, from what I hear from the corn industry, they're going to be okay with that fix. So that's good news to us. But we're here today to talk about trade. So what's happened in trade? We think it's all bad. Supposedly they renegotiated Korea early on. Our request was don't mess up what we had in agriculture. They didn't mess it up. When they went to renegotiate NAFTA, it scared us all to death. NAFTA, in its 23 years of existence, went from $4 billion worth of agricultural trade to $40 billion. And it is a big deal to us. So we asked them, don't do any harm to the agricultural piece of it. They didn't, and actually improved in some of the areas. But what you've heard here today is that there's some modernization of the rules around the USMCA. So our focus today is working with Congress and working with this administration to get it passed. And my hat's off to the Speaker. I really think she's trying really hard to find a way to pass USMCA. We feel pretty good about it. We know that she's appointed a working group. Someone's been down to Mexico this week. All that's really encouraging to us. I think she's trying real hard, and my hat's off to her. Mr. Lighthizer has been to Congress several times, trying to work with them to get it passed. So they're really trying to pass it, and we think if the farmers and ranchers and small businesses and Americans keep pounding on Congress, they'll finally bring it to a vote and get it passed. So USMCA is a big deal. The Japan agreement last week, we've talked about that a lot today. It's huge. It's huge for pork, and it's huge for beef, and it's huge for the grain farm because we got to feed all that beef and pork before it leaves here. And Darcy, you can speak to this better than I can, but I don't think it quite takes us to where TPP was, but it sure does help us because we know that Japan was a big part of TPP. And we just heard a comment about maybe there's a TPP 2. We all hope that happens. This administration's kind of whispered it a little bit there for a short period of time that they might go back and think about that. So we all pray that that might happen. But when you come to China and start talking about China from a farmer's point of view, I really had an opportunity to really see it from a different point of view a couple of weeks ago. I went to Copenhagen to the EU and North America Agricultural Conference, myself and 5 of our state presidents. And the question most asked to me was from the other countries, Mexico, Canada, and Europe, mainly Europe, was how long is it going to take your president to solve the problems in China? And after I got asked about 10 times, because I don't know the answer to that question. If any of y'all know, I'd like to know because I get asked that every day. After about 10 times, I finally asked one of them, I said, why? And he says, because our government's pushing us to expand so that we can fill the markets that you're not. And I said, so how do you feel about that? And they said, we're scared to death. we don't know whether we want to make that investment or not because we think your president's going to pull it off sometime. I also talked to Mr. Hogan, who's going to be their trade ambassador real soon if he gets the vote. And I just bluntly asked him, I said, I got this feeling that European countries would like to see Mr. Trump win over China because you have some of the same problems. We've heard that discussion today. All the world's been treated badly by China. And he said, yeah, we'd like to see him win. So my next question is, so why don't you help him? And he said, well, it's twofold, because one, they can take advantage of the gap that we leave. And two, he just says, your president doesn't want any help. So I think that a lot of people, a lot of countries around the world wanting him to succeed, but they're going to try to take advantage of the situation in the meantime. Those farmers from Canada, and I know we have a representative here from Canada, they're standing tall, but I tell you what, when I talk to them about USMCA, they don't like it one bit. They don't like that bargain that was swung. So it's interesting. It was really interesting to hear them talk about that. And then the Mexican farmers, they're all right. They want to go. They'd love to have a farm bill. That's all they want to talk about. They wanted us to convince their government to have a farm bill like we did, and that's what they wanted to talk to me about. So a different perspective of what's happening. I will tell you, though, the European farmers, what I was surprised to hear is they are scared to death, because the Green Party over there is slowly but surely taking every tool that they have in their toolbox to be efficient. All the technologies that we're enjoying here, what little few things that they had said, it's kind of like public initiatives that we have here. They'll get a public initiative up and the voters will vote it out. It just pulls that tool out of their toolbox. I've never heard farmers really as scared as they are. They were terrified. The other thing I'd like to bring up, too, that I think is a very positive thing, and it's been positive for us at American Farm Bureau working on policy, is that USDA really and truly has a dream team there. And it's just not because Sonny Perdue's a friend of mine. But if you talk to farmers across the country that's met Sonny Perdue, they trust him. He's a really good guy, and he really feels for the farmer and trying to do the right thing. And Sonny Perdue does have this president's ear. I know for a fact he does, because I've heard him talk, I've seen him interact, and I've heard him say, well, Sonny, if you think that's what we need to do, that's what we need to do. And we know that we would have been pulled out of NAFTA if Sonny Perdue hadn't been in the room with him that day. So I know they have a really good working relationship. And then if you look at the Deputy Secretary, Mr. Zinski, came from soybean, Undersecretary Nor, the Undersecretary Ibod, Undersecretary for Trade McKinney, who is burning up airplanes going all over the country to try to open up doors and all these other countries and start little deals. That's what they're doing, and they're working on a lot of important things. And I don't know in my lifetime, and we've had some great secretaries of agriculture, but I don't know that we've ever had a team like this that was so familiar with actual farming, because they actually come from there or they worked with it all their life like this team has. So that's a very positive thing. I will end what I have to say today by saying thank you again for allowing me to come. And it's a privilege to work for the greatest people on earth, and that's the salt of the earth of this country, and that's our farmers and ranchers. But I had a friend one day tell me his 3-year-old grandson was sitting at the table playing with this little toy. And the little toy was, if you set something up on the ledge, a little figure would come out and grab it. So he set a quarter up there, and the little figure reached up there and grabbed and pulled the quarter back. And he said, and they'd laugh. And he said another little quarter up there, and the little figure grab it and pull it back. And the granddaddy asked the grandson, says, well, who got your money? And the little boy said, the Democrat got it. And I said, the Democrats didn't take our markets, but we sure would love to know who did. And we'd like to get our markets back, because that's what farmers want. We want a level playing field. We don't want government checks. We want open markets. And that's what American Farm Bureau is trying to help develop policy that'll bring that. But really and truly, at the end of the day, it's people like Darcy Vader that makes things happen. And Darcy, can't tell you how much we appreciate all the work you did, and you know that we supported you in that TPP. The Rice guys might have had a little problem, little one, but we pulled everybody else to the table, and hopefully we will see a TPP 2, and Darcy's work will live on. So thank you for having me today, and let's pull that pickup truck up and solve the problems.